see what I mean? This is what this car feels like. Now we can feel it. Yeah. Now I've got brakes. Now we've got grip. Now we've got a dry circuit. That's what this thing feels like. That's what it's all about. Oh,
nicely done.
hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today is day 320 in my Cayman and mileage right now is 65,808. I bought this car last December on 57,000 miles and since then it's had 2 hard auto solos and I've done 4 track days. And in that time I've run 3 sets of brake discs, 4 sets of brake pads, and I'm now up to 9 tyres. So today I'm going to share with you what I've learned about the consumables on this car during that time. I'll start first with the tyres, and that means starting back at Bedford Autodrome in April. And on that track day I was running the tyres the car came on from the supplying dealer, which were Bridgestone RE050s, but they were N rated and they felt okay, gave the car a nice balance, no real complaints. But after the track day, closer inspection showed them to be over 7 years old. And by that point, the tread was starting to get low, but more importantly, they were starting to perish. There was some severe cracking in between the tread blocks. So it's difficult to form a proper opinion on those tyres as they were way past their best and they really had to go. I wanted to stay with N-rated tyres, which only gave me 2 options on this car in the sizes I need, and that was another set of the Bridgestones or Michelin's PS2. I'm a big fan of Michelin's tyres, so a set of those all round I think was the better of the 2 options. And with that nice new rubber, I then headed off to a GRRC track day at Goodwood in July. And unfortunately, I didn't get to push them as hard as I would have liked to on the day for reasons that will become clear when I get onto the brakes. But I did get to lean on them a bit throughout the day, and as with the Bridgestones, they did give the car a nice balance. They had good wear, good grip, good feel, and really good feedback. And with the braking issue that affected me at Goodwood sorted, it was off to Bedford Autodrome in August. And that turned out to be a really interesting day, a good one for learning. It was absolutely soaking wet in the morning, I mean properly wet, but it did dry out nicely in the afternoon. And thankfully, with the braking issue sorted, the brakes held up, so I did get to push the tyres quite a bit throughout the day, especially in the afternoon. But in the morning, I found them to have fantastic wet grip, really strong tyre. They held on really, really well in the damp. And in the dry in the afternoon, they were absolutely superb. Really, really high grip levels, so much so that one of my passengers thought I was running semi-slick tyres. So, really good tyres, really happy with them. Then, 1 week after Bedford, I found this, right in the shoulder. So I had that removed and thankfully it held pressure. But fast forward a few more weeks and it was starting to lose pressure. So that meant 1 more PS2 ordered and that was fitted in the middle of September. Which is a real shame really, because the tyre that I had to bin had only done a couple of track days and it had barely worn at all. The timing of the need to replace that though turned out to be quite good in the end, because I then found myself offered a morning session at Goodwood, and this morning on track was completely unexpected, completely unplanned, completely free of charge, so I just couldn't refuse. Yet again, I find myself breaking out all of my leads and tethers and cameras and wiring the car up for another day on track. And side note number 1 in this video, a few people have asked me specifically about my camera setup on track, what cameras I use, what settings, how I've got them mounted, and so on. There's far too much to go into here on that, deserves a separate video. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. As for these tyres and the track day at Goodwood in September, that was incredible. The best day I've had on track in this thing so far. By now, I had a lot of trust and confidence in the car, so I managed to get those tyres working really hard, and on them I have no complaints at all. Really good tyre, really friendly, and they wore really, really well. Given what they've been through, I've got plenty remaining on the tread to get me through the winter to the next track day in the spring. And that's despite almost getting another puncture as I was leaving the circuit at the end of the day. So that's my experience with the tyres then. Now on to the brakes, and starting again at Bedford in April. And at Bedford I had fairly fresh brake fluid fitted by the dealer 4 months previous, but the pads and discs were of unknown origin. Whatever they were, worked together really, really well, but the brake fluid failed on me really quite early in the day. So the brakes needed a thorough overhaul. So I started with some more capable brake fluid, and I paired that with a bargain set of original equipment quality Brembo discs and pads all round. Given how inexpensive the consumables are on this car, I wanted to start cheap and work my way up and see at what point I find a good combination. Besides, they're so cheap anyway that if I wear a set or two out on that journey, it's really no bother at all. And as it turns out, at the Goodwood track day in July, that's exactly what happened. The pads wore away like they were made of chalk. And more oddly than that was the imbalance in wear. The front pads wore almost down to the backing plate, and the rears barely wore at all. So they needed a change, no more messing about. Bluestuff NDX pads all round before the track day at Bedford in August, and a really good day was had there among friends. It was nice to have some brakes, and the car felt good. The brakes felt really strong. I had no complaints at all once I'd bedded them in properly. They were really, really good pads. They didn't wear too much from a full day on track, and the wheel deposits, unlike the Brembos, were nice and even across both axles. And side note too in this video, after the Bedford track day, this thing also passed its MOT. First time with advisories for slight surface corrosion on the front suspension dampers only. I think that's worthy of note. Until last December, this car had had quite an easy life. In the 10 years previous to me owning it, it had never done more than 3,500 miles in any one year. And in 2015, it only did just over 1,000. Then I got hold of it and I've tripled its annual yearly mileage. I've done 8,000 miles in this thing in the last 10 months. So I've beaten its 14-year-old suspension really hard over 456 miles on 2 auto solos and 4 track days. So in my experience and in my hands, I'd say these cars are built for that sort of abuse. They just lap it up. Apart from the handbrake, of course, which I managed to kill on the second auto solo. Back to the brakes then, and my second unplanned visit to Goodwood this year in September. Still running the Bluestuff pads. They've now done 2,000 miles in total, including the full day at Bedford. They seem to have worn a few millimetres at most. Here's what they look like after the first session at Goodwood. I was really making up for having brakes made of chalk last time I was on track at Goodwood. So for the first time on a circuit I'm really truly familiar with, I managed to work the brakes really, really hard. And in my hands and at the pace that I was lapping, they were good enough. The blues are more than adequate. I found they did have a bit of a strange feeling when they got really hot though, like the pad material compresses and becomes all squishy. This means the pedal can go a bit long, but if you push through that, the car still stops just fine. The pads were still biting into the discs and they were still doing enough to dissipate the energy. So I can see why some people say EBC Blues fade, but I don't think they do. If you push through that softness, and for me, push harder, the car stops just as you want it to. It just means you have to be on point with your heel and toe game, because you never know where the brake pedal is going to be in relation to the throttle. So after that morning, I can say the Blues, the performance of them is absolutely spot on. And the wear, well, a visual check of them before I left Goodwood showed them to have 4 to 5 millimeters on the visible edges. However, over the course of the next week, I started hearing a very light metal on metal grinding. It was very light, it was very slight, it was intermittent. Some drives it was there, some drives it wasn't, but it was worth whipping the pads out and having a look. And what I found when I did that was that there was really excessive pad wear on the leading edge on one pad on each side only. It was on the inner pad on the right hand side and the outer pad on the left. They wore at an extreme angle, and at worst there was 5 millimeters of material visible on the trailing edge, but it had worn right down to the metal on the leading edge. So why did the Bluestuff pads wear like this so severely I mean, these are EBC Bluestuff pads after all. They're meant for track use. They're meant to be able to handle some heat. Well, I put it down to the Brembo bi-directional original equipment quality discs. These were part of the cheap package of brakes that I fitted to the car back in May, and I found out soon after at Goodwood in July that the pads that came as part of this package were very far from original equipment quality. So let's talk about the discs then. Well, as standard, the discs on this car are meant to be left and right-handed, so they'll have holes and cooling vanes, all specifically meant to flow air a particular way on each side of the car. And the Brembo discs are bi-directional, meaning they can rotate both ways. So while they may look similar, they're the same on both sides of the axle. But however they're flowing air, I don't think they're doing it equally or adequately. And I think it's this imbalance of cooling air that's not flowing to the right places or in the right way that's giving localized hotspots and excessive localized wear. So yet again, I find myself putting more new brakes on my car on the front, but this time I've gone for just basic Techstar OEM pads, and I've also gone for some proper left and right-handed discs which will hopefully flow air as Porsche intended. Now, these Techstar OEM pads are just for road use only. I will be dropping another set of Bluestuff pads in before my next track day in the spring. Will these left and right-handed discs cure the uneven wear I experienced? Is that the cause? Who knows, but I will of course report back on that. And lastly, I'll end this video, given all the expenditure that I've had over the summer, with a quick cost of ownership update. Fuel economy, miles per gallon in my hands has averaged 24.4, and the 4 track days I've done this year are clearly visible there. Cumulative costs so far, you can see the PS2 tyres and the Brembo OEQ brakes in May, the Bluestuff pads in July, and more recently the new tyre in September and the discs and Techstar pads in October. And yes, that is a total of just over 5 grand, 4K of which is fuel, tyres and brakes. So if you buy one of these cars, don't do 8,000 miles in 10 months, don't do 2 auto solos, don't do 4 track days, and don't get through the consumables that I have, you'd be able to run this for a whole load less. But who buys one of these cars to leave it sat idle? They're not particularly exotic or special, they're just really, really well built German cars that excel at feeling so good to drive. And when they feel this good to drive, to leave them sat idle, in my opinion, that's a crime. So to sum up my findings then on the consumables, tyres, PS2s, awesome, perfect tyre, but then you'd expect that because they're Porsche N rated. Brembo OEQ discs and pads, absolute trash. And the Bluestuff NDX pads, love them. Great feel, good performance, good durability. That's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please give it the mandatory thumbs up. Subscribe please if you haven't already. Hit the all-important notification bell. If you really appreciate what I do here, please buy me a coffee. And thank you very, very much for watching.